You're live now.
Thank you.
All right. Call the Board of Supervisors work session to order. Today's work session is the round 5 smart scale. And Alan Saunders, the Louisa resident engineer, is here. Welcome, Alan. Welcome.
Chair Crozier, members of the board, good evening. I have a brief presentation for you this evening, and I'm reticent to leave this here because I left it there last time and it sat for a month or two.
At least you know people around here are relatively honest.
That's good.
Or lazy, one or the other.
For the presentation that I have, I wanted to go over some general terms and acronyms, a brief look back over the shoulder at round 4 and what happened there, some recommendations for round 5, the schedule, and then see if you have any questions that I can answer. So in front of you is a presentation that I'll lead through. And PSI is one of them. So proposed schedule. We are not really shown on this map. There we go.
I can fix it. You keep talking.
Okay. On this map, the road map in front of us, it shows it starting in March and we're ahead of schedule. In round 4, we began in March and we still didn't have enough time by the time we got to August to prep all of the applications and support the localities. So we're getting started even sooner trying to identify candidate projects. So pre-applications we'll be doing in March. We'll screen them, and by August, the final applications are due. They'll be reviewed by VDOT, and another entity, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, will then evaluate them later in the spring in 2023 and adopt the secondary 6-year plan in June of 2023 with the recommended projects. So we're about 18 months ahead of the CTV adoption, planning for the next step. VTrans needs, there are several terms that we go over, and Supervisor Marshall, if I go too quickly through this, PSI, VTrans, and crash modification factor, CMF. Those are 3 predominant acronyms that I use in this presentation. PSI it has the potential for safety improvement. So we may have an intersection that has 1,000 crashes a month, hypothetically speaking, but it may be constrained with a railroad on one side or a VOF easement or a park easement on the other, and it doesn't have a lot of opportunity for improvement. So it may have a high crash rating and need a safety improvement, but its PSI score, its potential for safety improvement, is very low because there's just nothing that we can do. So it's really a combination of both. It does have crash history and it needs to be improved, but it also has the opportunity to improve. So we're going to look at PSI and VTrans needs. It has to meet a safety need in our category of Virginia, category D. It has to meet a safety need in order to meet a VTrans need. Some areas where they have a lot of congestion in Northern Virginia in different categories, economic development, are predominant needs that may make it a VTrans need. But in our rural category D, Orange County, a VTrans need is focused on safety.
VTrans need is a TSN?
A TSN is a VTrans need. So if it's a PSI and then it's a TSN, then it's a PSI.
Handouts, we need handouts.
I have that. So we did a safety review for Smart Scale. And we had an initial review that we made some preliminary recommendations on. Thankfully, the traffic engineers have received an updated round of traffic data with crash history, and that's reflected in the information that we're going to review this evening.
One other thing real quick.
Yes, sir.
You said that we are a category D.
Yes, sir.
There are, throughout the state, there are a number of different categories, and our regional commission, based on the jurisdiction within it, opted to be in a category D, which puts our priorities for safety and other things in a different order than some of the others.
These are both recommendations the CTV is considering and the current categories.
Thank you, Alan.
Yes, sir. And I have another slide in there that shows our percentages in category D, but it's a lot of information to absorb. So the first acronym I used, this slide here, potential for safety improvement. The TSN isn't listed, but it has to be a PSI in order to make a traffic safety need, in order to be V-Trans eligible. So those are your three acronyms. The projects that we're going to go over this workshop, this recommendations, our PSI needs, they have a potential for safety improvement. They are a targeted safety need, transportation safety need, and meet a V-Trans need. So we've already screened out all of the other projects that don't meet those conditions. In Orange County, this slide shows the top PSI locations. If you can see that before you, we have 522 and 650. We have 522 and 20. The Commonwealth Transportation Board is voting today on whether or not to fund that project. That was a round 4 application. There are funds that are available to back fund round 4 projects. It was very high scoring. It almost scored well enough for funding in round 4.
522 and 20.
And 20. So with the funds that are available, with the revenue forecast that we have, there may be sufficient funds. The Commonwealth Transportation Board in their meeting today and tomorrow are going to vote on adding projects, and we're hopeful that 2522 is one of them. The next PSI location, up at Mine Run in 20. Then we have not only another location in 20 up at 601 at the lower end of Lake of the Woods, Route 3 and 20 intersection. The county applied for funding for Route 3 and 20 of Green Tea in round 4. It didn't score very well. It was a very expensive solution and there wasn't enough crash data there. Now, as we get into the presentation and see, that intersection is 8 out of 100 in the Culpeper District.
Which one is this?
The 3 and 20 intersection.
I think we knew that. Okay.
Yeah.
Just the data didn't quite catch up.
Right. It's now caught up. So now it's number 8. Yes, sir.
Quick question, since you have 621 and 20 on here. I know at one time there was some discussion. Has there ever been any further thought about straightening out Pine State Road to make it intersect at the same location as Mine Run Road?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, the only reason I ask is if there is ever that potential, now is the time to look at it because that's a new property owner of the Weems Farm. If anybody was ever in a position that they might be interested or willing to do that, if it's something that VDOT would be interested in. And we can talk about that later.
Okay. Yes, sir. Over at 601 and 20 in the intersection, that too is populated to the PSI, the potential for safety improvement list. Route 3 and 20 was on it last year. It's moved up this year. It's now number 8 in the district out of 100. And we also have a segment that includes the post office, but it's a segment along Route 3. It's not necessarily an intersection node, it's a segment. And then we have the Route 3 intersection at Lake of the Woods. So here in the list before you, we have the projects in Orange County that meet a PSI V-Trans need. A PSI is a TSN and it meets a V-Trans need. Route 3 and 20, just noted. As you see in the list, ranked total crash PSI for VDOT, it's number 8 in the district. Route 3 at Lake of the Woods, the Lake of the Woods entrance, that's 22 out of 100. Route 20 and 522, that's 30th. This presentation notes that it's funded with additional round 4 funding. I don't want to speculate on what CTV is going to do today, but I'm optimistic that they're going to fund that project. Route 20 and 621, that PSI trend has gotten worse. We've seen more crashes there, so it moved up. Now it's 56 out of 100. It meets a V-Trans need. Route 20 and 601 down South Lake of the Woods, that too has gotten worse. It's 85th in the district. 522 and 650 is now on the top 100 list based on the crash history, and it's 95th. So the segments that we've got, the Route 3 segment from Lake of the Woods to the post office, 522 from Raccoon Ford up to True Blue, Route 3 from post office to Route 20, and then Route 601. So thankfully, at least on the Route 601, one of the curves that's included in that length is a project that's advancing. So the previous applications that we've had, 601 low speed curve, we have number 1 and 2. Thankfully, number 2 is funded. The 522-20 That was resubmitted in round 3, we resubmitted in round 4, and we're optimistic that's going to get funded. The Gordonsville 1533 High Street Roundabout. The Gordonsville 231 High Street Roundabout. That was submitted in round 4 and is funded. The US 33 Route 20 East Roundabout, that was submitted and is funded moving forward. 2611, that still meets a PSI need. It was submitted before, and the crash history has gotten worse, so it would, in theory, score better as long as the project cost hasn't changed. 522 and 20, the roundabout. Noted that it's funded. We hope that that one's funded. The 231 High Street, that one's funded. Route 3 and 20 intersection improvements, that's going to be one of the recommendations that we have in round 5. So the Orange County recommendations, resubmitting 3 and 20, we need to sharpen the pencil on that. Chuck Proctor had some ideas to reduce the cost that would make it score better. In addition, its safety score is going to be higher because it's ranked higher in our top 100. Route 3, Lake of the Woods, ARCA. Route 3, Post Office intersection improvements, it meets a V-Trans need because it's part of the PSI segment. We have intersections and segments. The post office is in the segment that meets a potential for safety improvement. So that is an opportunity to apply for improvements. And the reason that I bring that up is with Wilderness Crossings, if we can align the county schedule, the development schedule for the project, and it's funded and it meets the developer schedule, the stars could be aligned to where this could help advance that intersection improvement for the county and the developer. So we're going to, over the next 5 months before March, 4 months, finalize the list of projects, and hopefully, again, with Wilderness Crossings, we may get some input from the developer and their schedule to advance to see if we can align those on Route 3. If there are any other recommendations, we're going to review that with our traffic engineers, see if there's something else the county needs. And based on the 4 project recommendations that we had from the group, the traffic engineers will reevaluate those and prepare for the application information that the county will have to submit. And based on your review, we'll begin finalizing the applications for the 4 projects to pre-apply in March.
With the one at Lake of the Woods intersection and the, in front of the post office there, do we know what those are supposed to look like or what the design is for those?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. They're just, that's the next stage to.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
If the county selects the Route 3 Lake of the Woods entrance as one of the 4
Okay,
project applications, then we would prepare a concept drawing, a cost estimate, do a preliminary
All right.
design that we would in turn
Okay.
give to you to submit.
It's my understanding that Lake of the Woods is in the process of reconfiguring interior portion of their entrance.
they've made some changes they do temporarily for Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
Right, but it was my understanding that they were making some interior changes that basically have been recommended for a long time of putting some more lanes to take traffic over towards the administration building and the fire station. Is that something they're just still talking about? Because
As far as I know.
my understanding was that they were told by VDOT, you need to take care of some interior problems before there's anything we can do for you, which I happen to absolutely agree with.
I heard an interesting thing this afternoon from one of the board members at Lowell. There's like 4,000 vehicles that go in and out of Lake of the Woods that do not have barcodes, but they are authorized to do that. And they charge a fee for the barcode. And one of the thoughts is eliminating that fee so more people get barcodes.
Right.
And
Yeah, there's a lot of things that.
I mean, that's a no cost, other than the loss of, loss of some barcode fees. That to me is a pretty obvious solution.
Right.
And they need to do that and see what that does.
What is the cost of the barcode?
I don't know, they're like $10 or something like, I mean, we're talking.
It's a $50 annual fee to get a sticker.
Well, that's for somebody like a contractor.
Oh, yeah, well, the barcodes themselves, they can't even be $10.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I'm talking about somebody who's already authorized to go do that.
Right.
And the fact that there's 4,000 of them that do not have, I mean, we only got 4,000 homes there.
Right. Exactly.
So, and all three of my vehicles had barcodes, so. That's one that I think VDOT needs to put a little more pressure on Lake of the Woods to deal with this no-cost kind of thing. I mean, I you know, just me, I was amazed when I found that out today.
Well, we had a meeting with the Lake of the Woods administration.
Have they ever mentioned that?
Yeah, they had two good ideas, and one of them was to relocate the administration facility that checks folks in and out. The other was a second entrance close to the dam. And those two things combined may help relieve.
I've gone on record before, and I will still go on record. I think that's the worst possible thing that they could ever do, is put a second entrance on Route 3. Because site distances, the flood inundation zone, and also you're having a new subdivision that is currently being built just west of where they put that other entrance.
Well, at my next board meeting, I will tell the board that there is a member on our supervisors that would say any VDOT money going to do that would be very, very low priority. And so we need to solve the problems internally.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that there wouldn't be some help that we could do. There's so many things, you know, like lengthening the turn gate, a few other things we could do, but there are things that need to happen at the gate.
Well, the concept solution that we talked about in the intersection of Lake of the Woods is an R-cut, is a restricted crossing U-turn. And traffic would be, crossing traffic from the Lake of the Woods to the other side of Route 3 would have to turn right.
Right, make a U-turn and I know.
And that would provide more room for left-turning vehicles from Route 3 west into the Lake of the Woods.
Well, and suggesting that as a comparison to getting more people to get barcodes might be part of the solution. Anyway, but I was quite surprised with that, and so I'm not a strong advocate of these other more expensive things when you just have people who don't have barcodes. You got your barcode?
I have my barcode. I even let my wife have one.
Well, in this list of recommendations, the reason the other two projects on Route 20, 611 and 621 aren't noted is their rank doesn't make them probable based on the amount of funds that we anticipate for smart scale on Route 5. It's not that they're not a good project or a need. They're just not ranked high enough in that PSI list to be probable for funding.
Alan, I had a question as I was going through this. When I saw your, the grouping that was a segment as opposed to an intersection, I forgot the exact language you used, but it occurred to me that 522, there's a segment, let me lead you where I'm headed here. There's a segment of 522, let's just say from Lahore Road up to 650, past 20, all the way to Pine Stick. There's a segment in there where the problem is a vehicle entering 522 from a stop and trying to merge into traffic that's running Lord knows how fast. On a Sunday afternoon, I can tell you very fast. Is there any way to look at that as a continuous problem as opposed to slicing it by individual intersections? I'm trying to work the system here, obviously, but you know, all three of those intersections, and there are others, ever on a road on the other side, right, is the same way.
Right.
It seems to me that the problem, it's a little bit like the 3 and 20. We from anecdotal information and our own experience realize that's a rough, tough, dangerous intersection. We know also that 522 on these entrance roads are really taking your life in your hands a lot of times. So I'm trying to find a way of better characterizing that problem in terms of the metrics to what the reality is that our citizens are facing. I don't know how you.
On the 522 corridor, apart from the targeted opportunities that are eligible for smart scale funding, we need to continue to look at 522. Given the traffic volumes and the speeds and the crashes that we've seen, the fatalities we've seen this year on that corridor, every opportunity that we see, we need to take advantage of, but it's going to be a low-cost countermeasure. Outside of smart scale and having a PSI segment, something that meets a V-Trans need that makes it eligible for the funding, it would have to be a different flavor of money. And we don't have the Highway Safety Improvement Program, FHWA funding for targeted needs as we had in the past. We've used HSIP funds for projects in the past, and now they're really applied to more corridors, but not 522. There would be things like guardrail and pavement marking changes and rumble strips. Those are things that the HSIP funds are being applied to now, systematic type funding needs, not a targeted improvement on 522, but if the trend continues, that's going to become a segment and it'll be a V-Trans need.
Well, I saw the numbers and I can see why it lands where it does in terms of the metrics you're using, but it's a problem. And part of the problem is line of sight in all of those areas is
What's about the volume of traffic? Right? How often do you monitor the volume of traffic? Because just personal experience, it's so much more than it used to be. So
It is. It is. The latest full count that we had was a 2019 count.
2019.
And I need to go back and see what the percent increase was. They're not looking at it on a Sunday or a weekend. I think that if you're looking at the target.
I wouldn't look at it then either.
Yeah, I wouldn't. The volume of truck traffic's increased and just the trips on it over from 2019, the counts around Lake Anna. In 2019, we did counts in October, and they were as high in October as they were in the previous July. And October of 2020 was higher than 90% of July of 2019. And that's because so many people have moved to this community. They're either living here now or living in teleworking, but the 522 corridor and the amount of traffic on it is increasing. And it's all year. It's not just those people.
And I always thought, the 288 bypass around Richmond has really brought a lot more truck traffic to 522 because that's a nice little cut through to get back on 95 north to 7. So
And it's a decent route, except for some few segments there that are pretty curvy and Louisa, but otherwise you can make pretty good time through there. And they do. I mean, I guess I would encourage you to continue to look for some creative solutions for those intersections. It occurred to me some time ago, before the roundabout in Somerset, there used to be a sign there that had a motion detector, apparently, because as you approached it, it would light and start flashing and say, "Hey, fool, slow down, you're about to enter a dangerous place."
Yeah, I know the guy who got that put up.
I'd like to talk to him and see what the magic. But I have actually seen something similar to that, and I forgot where it was. There was a light at an intersection that was triggered by motion if you pulled up and stopped, and it said there's oncoming traffic. It would light and say, be aware there's oncoming traffic, and at least it was just one more layer of, wake up, be careful, kind of thing. I don't know if any of those are in your arsenal or not, but
And we can ask, we can see if there's an innovation. If there's some innovation out there that we haven't tried, we have our pool of county safety and operational improvement monies that we like to target to those types of things that we can identify. The traffic engineers did a full review from 20 to south of 629. They didn't make any recommendations on speed limits or signage.
right.
But if there's a targeted need like that, especially, we go through these processes. We're talking about funds that if the Commonwealth Transportation Board approves them in 2023, then we'll see a solution 6 to 7 years later, where that could be millions and millions of dollars. Well, now 650 and 522 is a ranked project with a PSI number. It's in our top 100. We could identify a $20,000 countermeasure that we don't focus on that could make a significant improvement because we're focusing so hard on 8 years from now trying to find something that will work. And I think that we need to, even areas where we targeted with LED stop signs, that's a $2,500 countermeasure, and they're very effective in the right locations. So if there's something like that, that we can use our CSOI funds to target a safety need, then now that it's a ranked project, a ranked need, we've got more justification for that. But it is acute, it's acute locations, it's not the entire corridor. But over time, if we can continue to focus on the corridor and open up a sight distance and take down a fence line and put a fence back, take the cedars down. Every time we do something like that, it's the incremental improvements.
Sure.
That not let the perfect begin with the good, that we can still, every time we find an opportunity like that, we take advantage of it until, unfortunately, it becomes high enough on the PSI list to where it's going to get targeted funding for a segment.
Well, I mean, I continue to hear from people that have close calls that are concerned and all those kind of things.
Me
As I know
too.
you do as well, so.
Well, there's several that live south of 650 along that straight stretch in the passing zone, and they have driveway entrances that come right out to the passing zone. And if they're turning left and somebody's passing somebody and they can't see them, somebody getting around a tractor or a truck, they're gonna be head on into them. And I know it's gotta be.
Yeah, it is.
Right. It is scary. In the future, for at Verona and some of the entrances and intersections that are close to 20, having the roundabout is going to give us another tool to where they'll be able to turn right and go up to the roundabout and come back and turn left and just go through and then for those instead of turning left and oncoming traffic. But some of those folks that have the driveways there, it is scary. Or just cross the street and you pop over the hill and see them, it's scary. But we did walk through, if you have any questions or any other project needs, the recommendations that VDOT has in the 3 before you. And if there is another need that we can evaluate along that Route 3 segment that corresponds to Wilderness Crossings development that we can advance and the county can apply for funding for to support that development, we'd be glad to evaluate that too as our 4th project. And in the absence of 4, we'd look a little bit lower down the list to one of the Route 20 projects.
Very good. Any other questions or comments for Alan? Thank you very much,
Thank you,
as
Joe.
always.
Sorry I went through that so quickly. If you have any questions.
Good. Thank you. We're adjourned until our board meeting at 5 p.m.
Cole, can you put us in recess, please?
will this go to full screen when a meeting comes up? Go up here to view in the upper right corner. Maybe it is full screen and they just make it small like that.
They want you to see
Yeah,
the,
wait.
yeah.
Can you
Okay.
mute your microphone, please? Cole, can you prepare us for the return to the live feed, please?
We got some.
Cole or Walker, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are we ready for live stream? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we are ready.
Okay, it is 5 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. Everyone join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the agenda, I see no additions, deletions, or changes. Does anyone else have anything? Entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right. Next is special presentations and appearances. Business Spotlight. Jamie Collins, co-owner of Pinnacle Physical Therapy.
Yes.
Come right on up, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Come stand at the podium and come center stage.
All right, I'd like to present a little gift basket for you all. I'll just set it right there, we will trip on it and become a patient.
We'll need physical therapy.
Marketing program here.
I told my wife I wouldn't mess this up, so rewind that part back. Thank you all so much for having me. My name is James Collins. I'm a physical therapist, and together with my wife, we started Pinnacle Physical Therapy about 2.5 months ago. After practicing in Charlottesville for nearly 20 years, it's been really, really cool getting to know some of the people and reaching out to the community. And essentially, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Is our business model is one that requires us to integrate within the community. So for the holidays, we've started a blanket and food drive that we're working with Love Outreach to try to collect some blankets. They said they were in good shape for other things. So we're going to do that. Beginning of the year, we're going to be working with the UVA Pediatrics Group to start a childhood obesity clinic. one of the passions of mine, and I'm super looking forward to getting that thing rolling. We've also talked about doing a post-COVID program where we'll try to get people strength and endurance back after they've been down and out for a little while. We're working with the youth soccer team after the holidays. They're on a hiatus for the holidays, but to work with strengthening youth soccer players, mostly their hips, especially female athletes, can have problems where their hips become unstable, high risk of ACL injuries. And then possibly working with the EMS department to develop some strengthening and general conditioning to help them out. If at any time any of you all feel a need in the community, absolutely please reach out. Give us a call, Pinnacle Physical Therapy, and we'd love to help out with whatever the community needs. Again, thank you all very much.
Very good, thank you. Where is your physical location at?
Oh, that'd be good to mention, wouldn't it? We're directly next door to Orange Family Physicians.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Excellent.
Well,
Very
thanks
good.
for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, presentation of certificate of appreciation to Teresa Burris. Where's that kid? Come on up front here. Okay. Let's see if my reading skills are any good today, Teresa. All right. Certificate of appreciation, the County of Orange presents this certificate to Teresa Burris and wishes to express its sincere gratitude for her 28 years of dedicated service. Her wisdom and commitment have inspired many and will be remembered for years to come. We wish her good health, happiness, and relaxation in her retirement. Signed, James B. Crozier, Board of Supervisors, December 7th, 2021.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Teresa. Thank you, and it's been a real pleasure knowing you all these years.
You too.
I haven't worked with you that much, but some, and like I said, really appreciate everything that you've done throughout the years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Stephanie Straub, if you would like to do your introduction.
Good evening. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce Ryan Reed. Ryan is our new Public Works Director. Ryan joins us after several years in the public sector and with the City of Charlottesville. And with that, I'll let him introduce himself.
It's a pleasure to meet everyone. I had the pleasure of meeting Chairman Crozier earlier I guess it was last week. So I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone better and get situated and acquainted and see how I can best help Orange County. So I'm looking forward to it. Everybody's been great to work with, and feel free to reach out if I can help in any way.
So you're on our list of leaky roofs.
Exactly. The person to call. So
We just had a long conversation about some of those.
yeah. Okay. We've got luckily have a design firm on term contract for a condition assessment. So I'm looking to kind of keep track of all those things and be good to go. So.
Are you all familiar with the waste collection sites?
Yep. So I'm looking forward to working with everyone over there. So yeah.
Excellent. It's nice to have somebody young and naive on the Pleasure to have you on board.
Come back and see us in a couple of months.
See if he's still got that smile on his
Yeah,
face?
that's right.
Exactly.
He won't look as young, I don't think. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
This is a tough crowd.
As if anyone didn't know that. All right, next, Alan, you still here? I thought maybe you decided to take a nap with that long break that we had. Your quarterly update for us.
Yes, sir. You want to pull that up here?
I have it
This is-
on their
you did
screens.
great.
Do you need to be able to see it from yours?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. Chairman Crozier, gentlemen, good evening. My name is Alan Saunders with the Virginia Department of Transportation here for your quarterly update. I'm going to reference your latest county report, the December report, with a few highlights and address any questions you may have. So we started out during our work session earlier today. We did go over some smart scale key dates and recommendations as we move to funding applications for 2022. On page 2 of your monthly report, projects. Greenwood Road, Route 635 bridge replacement. The construction is predominantly finished. We still have some work to do on the approaches on the north end, and we're going to begin doing that probably within the next 10 weeks. Route 602, the segments that are west of 692, construction has begun. We're beginning replacing the culverts and finishing the culverts. All we really have to do on that section is shape up the stone, let it consolidate over the winter, and then hard surface in the spring. Route 689, Harbor Drive, and Matthews Mill. Matthews Mill, the work is going to continue to progress all the way to the north end of the road. 689 Harbor Drive, our hire equipment contractor is going to begin working on the culverts as soon as we can get them. It's already in the queue. Has begun. Very
Saw
good.
it this afternoon.
Very good. Route 601, low-speed curve, west of Lake of the Woods. The design for that project still continues and is advancing on schedule. The Safe Routes to School project in Gordonsville, that too, LAP, the Local Assistance Project, is moving ahead and scoping is next. So we're still advancing that project. The Route 3320 East roundabout project that was funded in Smart Scale Round 4. The survey is complete. Preliminary design is about to begin, and we'll also begin coordinating the first round of citizen information meetings to generate awareness about that project. And resurfacing. I did want to note that 2021 season wrapped up, and the completed routes are shown on VDOT's public website. I've listed in your monthly report the 2022 resurfacing funding, and thankfully that has gone up. So we have some plant mix and surface treatment routes. We'll identify those, we'll include them in your monthly report. You can share those with your constituents and let us know if you have any questions or concerns. On Route 3, on page 3, I'm going to walk very quickly through the traffic engineering studies, and if there's anything that we've missed that you've emailed in, please let us know and we'll get them on the list. A few of them, the Gateway Sign project, we just wrapped up the review of that and got our comments back. There's a go for that. The Route 618, 657 in District 1, the speed study for that is ongoing on Taylorsville and Albano with the ultimate goal of making them consistent.
Seems to be a long process.
It is. Our track engineering section in Culpeper has, like everyone else, struggled through some resources, but they have 2 new engineers on board and we're looking forward to them getting caught up. The good news is it hasn't fallen off the queue. So it's still in the list and we've got some new resources to dedicate. Route 3, Lake of the Woods, the entrance evaluations, we discussed them earlier in the workshop today. Constitution Highway and Route 658, the traffic engineers are evaluating the passing zone for possible changes, at least in the limits. Everona Road, District 3, this notes that the curb warning signs that traffic engineering is evaluating, I think they've installed those.
I think they have to. Yeah.
The Tower Road, Cooper Lane, they've also, I think that they installed the curve warning signs at Cooper Lane, but I'll check that. Old Gordonsville Road, we heard some concerns about that earlier, and the curve warning signs they'll evaluate. Hardwick Road, they're performing a speed sampling to determine if they're exceeding the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, and then we'll follow up in the next monthly report to let you know the results for that. Route 20 and Route 33, we are reviewing the intersection to see if the signs need to be upgraded. Prior to the roundabout design, we're trying to see if we can improve in both directions on 20 and along 33. Sight distance and signing needs to at least have bigger panels to control the speeds a little better. The studies that they've completed that I did want to note down at Constant Manor, those pavement markings are scheduled for installation. You'll see a left turn lane on Route 15 just north of town. We're using county safety and operational improvements for that. The Jacksontown Road speed study is 655, that was complete and the signs have been placed. And then 522 and 650, we talked about that a little earlier, but we continue to look for opportunities at that intersection to at least deploy some low-cost countermeasures until a larger project can be improved. The 20 and 522 signal, our traffic engineering section and our signal engineer, they're evaluating that, especially on Sundays and the evenings. And they've modified that timing and they're leveraging the cameras so they can actually see how the traffic's doing and manipulate that in real time. They're monitoring that, so that intersection is still on their radar. Hop down to the land use section on that page. Our land use staff have issued 157 permits so far in 2021. That's almost double this time of year than what they did last year. And last year was a record year. So they've just been really hopping in the volumes of work Then Mark Wood, Kim Carr, Bruce Henning, and John Wilson. They have 4 of them for 3 counties, and they just do a great job. In the maintenance activities, I did want to note around 396 work orders. And that too is really impressive for the crews in Gordonsville and Roseville. They've been very busy. And so gentlemen, that's all I have for your monthly report. Any questions? Or
Just
needs?
in town, talk about 600.
Yes, sir.
There's been several people that live along 600 have petitioned me and county to look at the opportunity to maybe have that, no truck thoroughfare through there. Like for you maybe take a look at that and whatever work you might want to do as far as a study to see if that's a good application to eliminate any trucks completely going through.
So what we can do is we'll evaluate the traffic types, we'll do some counts, we'll see what the speeds are, what the truck volumes are, and then look at the crash history too, and wrap that up and recommend that value.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
One other thing, Alan, received an email this week from a constituent concerned that about 621 Mine Run Road, that there was a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit sign when you come off of Route 20, and that was the only one on the stretch of the road. Like I said, I received that concern, and I was actually coming back into the county today from Spotsylvania, and it still says end of 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. I neglected to look on 621 and 20 and see if there is a speed limit 45. We need to just make sure that both ends are matched. I don't recall us reducing it to 45.
And it should sign on the other side of the four-way too.
Right,
Okay.
so,
Check.
yeah, if you can just check on those.
Yes, sir.
Because I do know that coming back into the county, it says it's the end of the speed limit 45, and for the most part, 55 seems to be appropriate, but just one of those interesting things. Anybody else? Mr. Johnson? No, okay. You're just deep in thought over there. Either that or.
Just waiting to see if anybody has.
Okay. All right. Alan, thank you very much.
Yes, sir, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You too. Take care. All right, next is an annual presentation from Dogwood Village. Pam. Come on.
Good evening, everyone. I started with Dogwood Village March 2nd, 2020, and a week later, we closed down the facility for COVID. So it's definitely been a journey, and we've had lots of successes and many challenges. I wanted to share first some of the awards that we have received and our staff has received. Tabitha Payne, who is our Director of Nursing, was awarded the honor of Director of Nursing of the Year with the Virginia Healthcare Association, which is the largest nursing home association in the state of Virginia. And then also Cornelia Braxton received the CNA Award of the Year with VHCA. So we feel very honored that we have 2 of our people that were given this award, which is very prestigious for the whole state. Dogwood Village received an award from the Health Quality Innovators Network, it's hard to say, last year for an innovation that we came up with. We have residents that don't keep their masks on frequently because they have dementia or they just don't like to wear them. And we had an infection control survey, and the surveyor said, what are you doing to protect those people from other people coming up to them? So we created a barrier, and it was very simple. It was a clothing rack that's shaped like an L, and we put clear shower curtains on it, and then we can put those around the residents so that nobody can come up and get close to them. So we had a following infection control survey later, and we had no deficiencies, and that was part of the reason why we were able. So we got the Innovator Award of the Year for that. We received recognition from Newsweek for being one of the best nursing homes in Virginia for both 2021 and 2022. They push it forward, I guess, since we're not quite there. We also received the Orange County Chamber of Commerce Business of the Month Award in June of this year. We received numerous donations from our community. Over 10 local vendors, businesses have made donations to the facility over the past year and a half, which has been very helpful. They've donated masks, various food items, door prizes for our teams, and numerous other things, along with community people. For last fiscal year, we served in senior living an average of 40 residents and 36 for the fiscal year so far. We had 17 move-ins during 2019 and 2020 fiscal year and 11 for 2020-2021 fiscal year. In health rehab, we had an average of 129 residents in 2020-2021 and an average census of 129 for fiscal year 21-22 so far. In 19 and 20 fiscal year, we had 317 admissions into health and rehab. Of those, 230 of them were Medicare patients. And out of those Medicare patients, 16 of them stayed long-term care. In fiscal year 2020 and 2021, we had 191 admissions. 141 of them were Medicare, 11 of which stayed long-term care. So you can see there was a big drastic drop there, and that was due to COVID. For this year so far, we've had about 105 admissions. We currently have 246 team members in the health and rehab and 56 team members in senior living. So we have about 300 team members. So we service quite a few employees or team members from the community. We also continue to have a clean and unqualified audit, financial audit, which we've had for several years now. As I mentioned earlier, we did have one infection control survey and we had one deficiency, and then we had the follow-up one. We had COVID and we had no deficiencies, which was during our outbreak, which is phenomenal. My team did a great job. And then we had our annual survey this year in June, and we had 7 deficiencies. And of those 7, 4 of them were all for the same thing, and they were all minor. There were no substandard quality of care deficiencies whatsoever. So the average number of deficiencies in the state of Virginia currently is 9 to 12. So we did really well on that. Unfortunately, we lost one of our team members this year, right before Thanksgiving, and she had 2 small children. So our team at Dogwood got together and donated funds so that those 2 little boys could have a Christmas this year. And they wanted the Nintendo Switch, which is like a $250 gift. And so we had collected enough to give both of them the Switch plus additional gifts for Christmas. So that was, we're a family there, you know, we take care of our own. We were a 5-star facility. We dropped 1 star to a 4-star, but that was only because of staffing. Our quality measures continue to be 5-star, which is basically focused on the care provided to the residents. Unfortunately, during COVID, our residents were confined to their room, which was quite devastating for them, to their mental health. It was really rough. So as COVID progressed in both buildings, we were fortunate we didn't have COVID in either building until August and September of this year. So we went almost at about 18 months without getting COVID in the building. So I was really proud of the team. Our census dropped because people didn't want to place their loved ones into a nursing facility or an assisted living facility because they couldn't come visit. And that was based on the guidelines from our governing body, CMS. So we started, and then plus the hospitals, elective surgeries were stopped. As you all know, you've heard that on the news, so that hurt us from that perspective. We get quite a few referrals from the hospital, obviously. So we started FaceTime visits with our residents to try to bring their families as close to them as possible with iPads, and we received donations of several iPads so that we could offer that to our residents. And our activities department and all departments really worked very hard to keep the residents engaged while they were confined to their rooms. We had doorway activities, we had things for them to do in the rooms, you know, to keep them active. But still, you know, they weren't interacting with a lot of people. So socially, it was devastating to our residents. We hired some hospitality aides because we were running low on CNAs. And so the hospitality aides actually helped and facilitated some of the programs with the activities department and supported a lot of the COVID type activities that we had to do. We started seeing a rise in cost of goods. Beef products went up in July of 2020 by 40 to 60%. Gloves increased per case from $33 to $55 to $102. Protein products continued to rise another 14%, and then costs of all food products increased from 5 to 196%. So that was a huge impact on us, and our budget, obviously. The additional expenses incurred were PPE, that we have to wear, the personal protective equipment. We had to buy zipper doors that we put up for our red unit and on the doors of the resident rooms so that if we didn't get COVID in the building, we could isolate them as much as possible. We built a visitation booth, we bought tents for outside visitation, and of course the barriers that I talked about earlier. Our COVID nursing supply expenses alone were approximately $577,000, almost $578,000. And we paid roughly about $450,000 in bonuses to our staff to pick up shifts because we had lost some staff due to pregnancies. We had must be in the water around here, but we had 5 nurses get pregnant and they all delivered within a couple weeks of each other. So, it was, we were down quite a bit of staff, and then we lost some people to childcare because schools were out and they had to stay home and they couldn't get childcare services. And also some people just decided they didn't want to work in healthcare because of COVID. Our lost revenue from 2019 to 2020 fiscal year ending 2/20 was $706,000, almost $707,000. Then from 20 to 21, including the first 2 quarters, we lost revenue has been about $404,000 already. We received $1.7 million from the stimulus funds, and 1.3 in fiscal year 2021, and 402,000 in fiscal year 22 for health and rehab. Senior living received $405,000, almost $406,000 from under the PPP loan. Even with these funds, our net loss for 2021 for senior living was $1.2 million and $935,000 for health and rehab. Excuse me. And then for 2022, that was 2021. For 2022 through October, our loss for senior living has been $477,000, and for health and rehab, $517,000. And these are all due to COVID and the drop in census and the increase in expenses. We've had staffing challenges, as I said, and even with the staffing challenges we had, our staff stepped up and said, we do not want agency in here, and so they picked up shifts, and a lot of double shifts, a lot of 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, 14 days, full pay period. They're very committed. We have to test frequently due to the guidelines. Most of the time we've been testing at least twice a week because of the rate in Orange County, which is at 11.21 right now. And we spent $100,000 on tests prior to the government starting to send us free tests. So that's the cost, plus any PCRs that we do is $103 per test. Anybody has symptoms whatsoever, we have to do a PCR. And the residents' PCR gets billed to their insurance, but the staff we pay for. We were fortunate enough, like I said, not to have an outbreak until August of this year. We then had our outbreak in senior living, and we had 5 residents that contracted COVID all at the same time, and we lost 2 of them. One was vaccinated, one was not vaccinated. The one that was vaccinated had severe COPD, so the COVID just compromised that even more. We then had another resident in senior living that contracted it later, and she went to the hospital and ultimately passed. And then one more resident contracted it, but she was okay. And of course, each time we do that, all the residents have to be quarantined to their room for 14 days until we can get a negative test, with everybody being tested negatively. And then in September, we had an outbreak in health and rehab. That was secondary to a resident going out in the community and not wearing the mask properly, and brought it back in. One of our nurses, we had 32 residents contract COVID and 28 team members contracted COVID from this particular outbreak. There were 3 deaths from COVID in health and rehab. We had to set up our COVID unit, which we called our red zone, and we had one nurse that worked 14 days straight in the red zone, set the whole thing up, made sure they had the supplies and the procedures and everything they needed to keep everybody safe. And she sometimes worked 24 hours, and other times she'd get 2 or 3 hours sleep. So it's been pretty tough, you know. But we got through it, and this is real wood. We haven't had any more, so we're keeping our fingers crossed. New regulatory requirements have been implemented based upon the mandate for the vaccine for all healthcare workers. And now, as we know, that's been put on hold due to the injunction against it. We currently have 80% of our team members vaccinated, 5% partially vaccinated, and 10% unvaccinated, with 5% exempted. We have 96% of our residents are vaccinated in health and rehab, and 100% of our residents in senior living are vaccinated and boosted. We have, of those eligible, we have 50% of our team members and 84% in health and rehab of our residents that have received the booster. And then since the vaccine mandate has been put on hold, even prior to, we lost 3 employees due to the vaccine mandate, which losing 1 employee is 1 too many, but 3 is not horrible, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed with that. We are starting new programs that are very exciting. Restorative sleep program, which is focused on ensuring our residents get a good night's sleep so that they can participate in activities more, they will be socialized more, they eat better, their health is better overall. So we're focused on that. A walk to dine program that helps people get out of those wheelchairs and walk to the dining room. Assisted diners in the dining room versus assisting diners in their rooms, feeding them in their rooms, getting them into the dining room so they can have more socialization. And then again with dining is, instead of having people dine in their wheelchairs, get them up and sit them in a dining room chair so that their, posture and everything, they're better. We are starting a personalized medication management program where the medications will be passed in the resident's room from a medicine cabinet in the resident's room. It's a lot, of course, but that's in the works. We contracted with a new pharmacy which decreased our costs immensely. We're looking at a safety program. We're also developing a snoozling room, which is focused on helping to decrease the behaviors of dementia residents or any of the staff, and a serenity room, which will be a room that is for those residents that are imminently dying. And it will be just a private room that's focused on providing the family privacy. Because a lot of times, they have a roommate and there's a lot of families in there and the roommate is kind of shut off, and so we decided we'd make a private room for the serenity room. And I think that's all. Any questions?
It's quite a dose of reality to live through what you guys have had to go through for the past couple of years.
What is a big concern are the financial losses we're seeing. And how long we can keep that up, and it doesn't appear that the conditions are going to alter significantly. And we do have some reserves, but I'm afraid those are going to be scarfed up in not too distant future. There are things that we'd like to try to do in terms of improving the facilities, but because of the current COVID situation and even the uncertainty about how healthcare is functioning in terms of fewer people going to rehab, going home directly from the hospital, and a variety of other things that are new rules, concerns about ratios of staff to residents, the whole range of things that are uncertain about that, all of which are concerning us from a financial standpoint, as well as from the ability to continue to provide the best of care to our patients and residents.
One item I'd like to highlight, you mentioned, Pam, going through the staff. The commitment on the part of the staff to not only work the long shifts, but they had to completely alter their life because they could not leave the facility to be with their family or even go to the grocery store and become exposed with the risk of bringing it back to the facility. So this was a life-altering kind of a situation, not just because of the residents that had to stay in the room and those kind of things, but the impact on the staff and their quality of life, their normal life, the ability to be with their own family was severely altered. But yet, I stepped up.
Yes, they did. I mean, I just can't say enough about our team there. They're just so committed and caring and loving for the residents. It's just, it's really honorable.
And you can see that because they don't want to hire agency staff. It's one
Which is
thing.
an outside contractor.
Outside contractors to come in and first of all, the expense, but they don't come there with the same dedication and personal feel for the patients and the residents that our own staff does. So they're the ones that tend to say, no, I will do a double shift rather than bringing on an agency person. And that, again, speaks to their commitment.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Appreciate it. I have one more comment.
Yes.
Gotten away now 2 years not giving us dinner. We expect a superb dinner.
Oh, it will be premiere. Even if we have to serve it here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next is new business. Ms. Amos, please purchase of a new tanker truck.
Good evening, everyone. In front of you is a memo for lease purchase of a tanker truck for Lake of the Woods Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company. We put together a selection committee that reviewed various types of trucks, pricing, components, and cooperative contracts that the county could utilize for the purchase. Atlantic Emergency Solutions has a 2023 Pierce tanker truck, meeting all of the requested components, available through a cooperative contract with HGAC, Houston Galveston Area Council. The total amount for this project is $548,826, which has been budgeted in CIP project 1236. We have Chief Mendonca here tonight with us if you have any specific questions about the tanker truck.
Just a real quick thing I want to make sure. This is to do a lease purchase of a county tanker truck to be stationed at the Lake of the Woods.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure that was. The county taxpayers are paying for it.
Yes.
They need to know that they are the ones who purchased
They
it.
got the titles.
Exactly.
Yes.
Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to say about the tanker or anything?
No, sir. I mean, the committee did a great job. I made sure there was one rep per department, and that they did not, their own rep did not get to evaluate their equipment. So it was different people, so we had a fair value, and we were able to hit this number by pretty much doing away with anything that's cool and electronic, which has been failing rapidly on our new units anyway, so.
That actually is one question that I do have.
Yep.
Are the electronics being spec'd to be midship or above? Because I know that's been a concern with some of the newer apparatus.
Right.
Electronics are slung on the undercarriage, which if you have high water, they're the only thing preventing them to going through the high water.
Right.
And I had that instance down off of Route 3.
Yeah, all of the new apparatus are midship and above,
Okay.
and the wireways are now in a automotive version of conduit that provides them with some protection. It just, like everything else electronic, that seems to be what fails the most in our units, is the stuff that's electronic, vice, mechanical, electrical. So,
Amanda, do we have a sense of when this will be delivered?
right now, on average, it's 9 to 12 months minimum,
If they get the chips.
if you can get, the supply chain is just horrible right now, there's impacts everywhere.
All right.
So when you're saying electronics, you're referring to chips, correct?
Not just chips, they're
No.
the electronic boards.
So there's I/O boards, the foam systems now are all electronic. The deluge guns that we use for delivering 750 gallons per minute, all of those went electronic. We've either removed them or we've gone back to mechanical guns, which unfortunately means a firefighter's gotta go up on top of the apparatus, which is fine. We're used to it. So all of that, I mean, we've had a huge problem with the motors that run all that stuff. And we have to have the motors manufactured because the delay in the manufacturing is like 6 months now. And my engine is a perfect example. There was a 6-month delivery charge for the Master Stream gun for the 2 electric motors that have gone out. So we went out and I paid an independent organization to build 2 motors.
The question contingent upon the approved bank fund financing, is that an issue or a problem?
It shouldn't be, no.
All right.
It'll be over a 10-year lease.
Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you
you,
very
Jeff.
much.
Thanks, man.
All right, next is amendment to chapter 34, the flood hazard reduction. County ordinances, Mr. Gillespie.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have before you a memo relating to the subject. The background is that in 1997, the board of supervisors adopted an ordinance amending the code creating special flood hazard areas, what is known as chapter 34. By the time the new FEMA firm maps are to be adopted and established in 2022, that'll be a 25-year-old ordinance. It's had one amendment in that time. And there are some substantial changes that are proposed through codification through a model code that we received from the Virginia Department of Conservation, Recreation, and the PCR. So as part of the latest flood insurance rate map firm adoption process, Virginia DCR reviews the flood management programs for compliance, and also in looking at those promulgates a model code that would be adopted to bring the maps and bring the codes into compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP. Doing that, like I said, gets those to where the maps can be put into effect in May 2022. So after years of compiling data, studying the physical conditions, holding community meetings, FEMA has finalized the maps for adoption and establishment in the spring, May of 2022. On November 17th, 2021, we received a letter from FEMA explaining what the new timeline is for these to go into effect May 3rd, 2022. As part of that participation in the NFIP, Orange County
is required to amend the floodplain ordinance to adopt the maps. And then also as part of that, as I said, DCR will review the adopting ordinance. So the model code that we received from DCR that they promulgate across the state does not have a separate chapter for flood hazard reduction. What it proposes to do is normalize what has been practiced in many places by having these mapped as special flood hazard districts within the zoning ordinance. So it's a change to remove chapter 34 and bring those mapped areas into chapter 70 of the zoning ordinance.
When we're talking about districts, I mean, I understand that specific areas are flood hazard areas. They show up on the maps.
Correct.
How does that relate to the district?
So it establishes an overlay district. So each overlay district is a special flood hazard overlay district.
Okay, so,
Which
so
is
I'm looking
essentially
around
what
Lake of the Woods, I've got a bunch of areas that would be in a flood zone. Those would then become a district?
Basically, they're the same special flood hazard special flood hazard risk district that exists today with the different classifications, the AE zone, the X zone, the O zone, all.
And that defines different kinds of hazards, but we're not taking and making one big district. We're talking about each flood hazard area is a district, applies to a given district definition.
Exactly right. And so it's essentially using the firm maps the way that they're used now by reference. And so this just goes back to the firm maps.
But it might have a different definition if they're worried about water flow or just a water rise.
Correct. The base flood elevations that are in there are derived from, again, these years of study. And they're more precise than the FEMA maps have been in the past, as I think everybody knows. Mapping technology over the last 25 years is more accurate.
Okay. All right.
So in the memo, I've outlined a schedule with Allison's help with getting to meetings and getting to hearings.
Excuse me,
Yes.
back to another question.
Sure.
When I'm looking at a specific flood area, how does that get defined as to which district that's in?
That's mapped on the FEMA maps. And
That's
so
on the FEMA map?
It is, yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
So basically, what Orange County will do will basically indicate, parcel by parcel in these overlays, that it's a special flood hazard area. Go refer to the firm maps to be able to know what the level of risk is. Is it a low risk? Is it a high risk?
Depending on what the district designation is.
Correct, on the established FEMA maps. Yes.
Okay. Now, we've got a couple of districts in here that deal with coastal waters.
Correct, they don't apply. We certainly don't have to.
Do we need to have them in our ordinance?
No, they can be stricken.
But we need to explain why we struck them.
But they should be stricken.
Sure. That was one of my concerns going through this. I mean, do we really need to add 34 pages to our ordinance, some of which are, like the coastal example and others? I mean, to what extent are we forced to use this template as is, or is there leeway to do a little bit of editing at least?
So we'll find out when we submit, number one, with any guidance that you all have, with changes that you would like to see. And then number two, after we submit the DCR, if we strike more than they feel should be stricken, or if you add or change things that have quantities in them that they don't want to have changed, then in their opinion, they would say, we don't think this is going to pass the FEMA muster, and you need to revisit those. I thought the same about the coastal districts, but I'll be honest, I worked with a light hand. I kept in the 2 pages of introductory information as well as the table of contents from the model code. My initial draft of this actually saved the 35 pages that was the model code in its unadulterated form, plus the 34 pages in what I modified. So, I mean, just to be transparent, it's there if you want to see it. I worked with a pretty light hand. I would strike the coastal zones because they.
But you should be able to look at all the designated areas in the county and say, these are the only ones that meet these various district requirements and eliminate the others?
I can. I believe we're gonna have most of those, but I will check.
Okay, all right.
I mean, Orange County, relative to other areas, doesn't have some of the flooding problems that, right, but I think we have most of the districts except for the zones, except for the coastal zone.
Now, when I'm looking here and I'm talking about water flows and elevation rises and stuff like that, Does the Rapidan River become part of that? Is that, any changes in the Rapidan River would be affected? Because there's some categories here that talk about elevation rise and talk about water flows and stuff like that.
Right.
The Rapidan River would fit into that, and any of the areas that are adjacent to the river that are affected.
Correct, yes, sir. And so one of the great changes that's come out of these years of study that we've talked about in community engagement is people stood up, number one, and said, hey, we don't have a historic flooding problem here, and I'm shown on a flood map. Or we do have a historic flooding problem that's worse than the flood maps show. The second part is the flood maps are based on more detail. Just the way that they're mapped is based on more detailed topographic information. And so some of those cliffs in the Somerset Golf Course area, for example, there are areas that clearly never should have been mapped in the floodplain because they were out of it. But in the old FEMA firm maps, they were shown floodplain because looking at it from a gross level, kind of eye level, it looks like it would be in the floodplain.
Well, and there were some significant differences, even in what FEMA generated this last round.
Right.
In terms of what Lake of the Woods had with their dam study.
Yes, yes.
And so, given those big differences, that it seems to me that how much confidence that we have in the rest of the county doesn't have a dam study to support it. I mean, we got to live with it, I understand, but.
So the real shame is the whole reason for this is to replenish their funds that they've wasted. I'm sorry.
As a general rule, if you're a property owner, you feel like you're adversely impacted by what we adopt, there is a letter of map adjustment process that you can go through. It's not free, and that is a dig at the program a little bit, but you can seek surveyor engineering data and make a case that you ought to be in a different zone or out of the zone altogether.
Exactly right. And that's always been a recourse for people to make that letter of map adjustment, go to a surveyor or engineer and get it sharpened up. What's better now is the mapping. It is a more precise mapping. But if there's some discrepancy, if there's a man-made feature on the ground that changes the floodplain or floodway, that needs to be accounted for. Anyway, this is an administration through the code changes.
Josh,
Yes, sir.
it seems to me that there needs to be some time to get acquainted with these new maps and even to the point potentially of individual property owners to evaluate that. And do you see a concern of putting an ordinance in place either simultaneously or without maybe even that opportunity to look at these? I mean, there's a couple of places in here it talks about and I hope this is a typo, but I don't think it is, a 0.2% probability of a flood on an annual basis.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
that's 0.002. You can't measure 0.002 outside of a lab, I don't think, but really? Is that what we're saying to people from a practical standpoint? I mean, there's a phase of this that seems to be out of sync a little bit.
I believe the 0.2% chance of flooding would be a 1 in 50 year flood event.
It says annual.
Right. So, 1 in 50 years. So I will say the engagement and the outreach that took place before I came to Orange County was done in accordance with FEMA's program for outreach. So there was a postcard system that went out. All the potentially affected property owners were mailed that information. And the postcard directed people to the county's webpage, which had links to get to FEMA's prospective flood maps and the flood map changes.
Right.
So it showed what the mapping was, really is now until May 2022, but what the mapping showed and what the projected future mapping would be. So everyone who received those postcards, and there were thousands mailed, has had an opportunity to go to FEMA's website, look at the maps, again, before and after comparative maps, and see the changes, and then comment back. And I know Chair Crozier and others, and Mr. Frank probably as well, have heard from affected property owners in your districts where flooding has occurred. And if they took issue, then they were taking issue essentially with FEMA. And we had some correspondence back on some disputes where the county wanted to see changes in maps.
Well, in my district, the association and their dam people managed to deal with that.
That's right, that was one change that made.
And there were some individual property owners that were shown as being in an area that, weren't, and I know that they made an attempt to have it changed, but not having seen the map, I don't know whether they were successful or not.
Correct. I will tell you, my time here since March of this year, I've met with one person related to a pending map change. That's exactly the situation I was describing on the Rapidan, where he's a fairly new buyer. He wanted to be released from having flood insurance because he had such an embankment with no structure that there was no flood risk, zero. However, on the current or sort of the old maps that are getting replaced, it looked as if he had properties in the floodplain. And it's clearly demonstrated with the new mapping that he's not at risk.
Are we getting all this, as this particular ordinance potentially has some significant impacts, maybe a few people? Are we doing enough to make sure that, now they've all gotten postcards on their previously, but it seems this is sort of another stage, and we need to do something to make sure that people can say, oops, this is going, and go back, and are we directing them to the FEMA maps, things like that, so that they can feel like they're not caught out in the cold here?
We have not done that through mailing, and we have not planned to do that through mailing.
I'm not talking about a mailing, I'm talking about just as we advertise this ordinance change.
Yes, sir.
That we make sure that, I don't know whether I've got this, or maybe I just bought this property, or, there's this creek near me, and being able to, for them to be able to see to what degree they're impacted. Because I think that that's being fair to them. They can get this information as the advertising for this ordinance starts through the process. But I think I would do it even sooner than we advertise for a public hearing, because that may be too late. So if we even at some point advertise the fact that we're going to review this at our next meeting, before we submit it?
So we plugged in, meeting at your next meeting, if you have guidance and direction from this meeting today, any outstanding questions, if you want me to, take a bit of a scalpel to, or a little bit more of a blade to the draft language and cut out things that are clearly not applicable in orange, like the coastal zone.
But I would make sure that when we submit it, we tell them why we're cutting pieces out.
Right, we would have a transmittal cover. I would have a cover memo explaining what.
But at the same time, we're going to submit this thing after our next meeting, I guess that's the schedule.
So the deadline for DCR to receive a draft is January 15th.
But we're planning on beating that by a margin.
Correct. So if you have directed changes tonight, I'll make those changes. If you have outstanding questions, you want me to come back at your next meeting, we can do that too.
I'm just trying to give the public a chance, the same chance we have.
Mr. Perman, I think we can go back to the web approach that we had and try to make sure that that's stood back up with a little bit of update, that this is where we are and the links so folks can go to maps. If you're buying property, you typically do, if you're getting a mortgage, need to go through a map, flood map certification agent, and they should be understanding where these maps are. Certainly once they're officially adopted, that's their fiduciary responsibility. But in the meantime, while we're still in process, we can certainly make sure our web tool is available to the public to use during this next few months.
Yep.
Okay.
One area I have a major concern with is under the examples of floodplain management ordinance. The third bulleted paragraph, where DCR is recommending.
What page is it?
The first page.
Going to be on page 1.
Page 1.
Where where they recommend that our ordinance be more strict than FEMA about it. We run into problems every time we do that, every single time. And I have no desire, none whatsoever, to make our citizens go through more garbage just to live than what we already have. I have no desire to make a more stringent ordinance on these floodplain maps. I'd like to see anything related to that removed. That's my opinion. I just don't want to see, we're already getting enough stuff shoved down our throats.
I agree with that, son.
I do too.
Yeah, the other concern I have is that does either our ordinance or by reference to other regs, I mean, this is called a flood insurance rate map for a reason. Right? Are we going to be in a position where we're forcing, or maybe the county becomes the enforcer of the requirement to buy flood insurance in some of these cases? You know, it's a concern. It is a concern. I mean, I don't.
How would you mean that happening?
Well, that's not our response. I mean, that's mortgages and the federal government, the program. We just have to have the program element of having maps and notice and require people.
And permit approvals.
And require people to adhere to the building restrictions.
That may be the connection, because one of the things this does, the ordinance at least does, is it basically says, if you meet these conditions in terms of designs and setbacks and elevations and all the other construction materials, then we will approve you constructing in one of these areas. And I assume that means as well as you buy the flood insurance in whatever rate category you're.
We don't have to make them do that. That's up to them.
Yeah.
They're gonna get.
I don't think it's voluntary.
It's not.
It won't be, that's the problem, it won't be voluntary.
If you're not financing, you do not have to buy flood insurance. But a bank's not gonna loan you money unless you do. But if you wanna build it in compliance and then take the risk by not buying the insurance, you just don't get it. You just don't get a payout if you're not filing a claim because you don't have anybody to claim against.
Okay. Obviously, we have further review of this. We need to, one, I think, I believe I have a consensus that we do not want to go beyond the federal requirements.
Yeah, but if the feds or the state raises the bar, then we will raise our bar.
I don't think the state, I think this is a federal, it's a plan to put money into a federal insurance pool.
Because they're losing,
Plain and simple.
lots of money.
Oh, yeah, and I just,
And therein lies the concern.
right, the less that our hands are in this, the happier I'll be. Doing just literally the minimum that's required.
I think most of us is, we've got the designations and certain designations have certain requirements for a permit to be issued. And once we've issued the permit, as long as we follow the rules in terms of issuing the permit, make sure that the permittee knows what his rules are.
And we're likely to be audited from time to time. They'll come back and check our records, make sure they may do a field visit and then a permit file visit and see if they line up, that we did what we said we were supposed to do, and then you move on.
And what seems to me to be the burden on the county is making sure that the records are maintained forever.
Mr. Friend, that is correct. And so typical building permits are purged under state law after 3 to 5 years at the most, or 1 to 3 years. And so this is a completely different program. That is correct. We would be keeping it.
So that building permit now needs to be held on
No,
forever.
it can't be. It can't be.
The record of the floodplain.
The floodplain, only, because the building permit by state law has to be purged.
So we'll have a record relating to the floodplain issues only, the base flood elevation, if there's any passage through the foundation or the
So
foundation
it's
wall.
just a different electronic copy within Munis or whatever platform we're on.
That's right.
Has to be maintained, but the building permits themselves are purged.
That's right. So they'll, exactly. So the note in the database system would basically say this property's in a floodplain. Certain measures have been undertaken. Those measures are, you would call those out. And then obviously great.
And we would have approved the building permit based upon the requirements of the ordinance.
Correct. And Mr. Crozier's correct too, to point out, and that's why I left all this in here. There are places where DCR very helpfully put footnotes in there as to places they felt were, number one, optional, but number two, warranted in their opinion. So I encourage you to read those. I will go back through and strike everything that's above the federal minimum and above the base standard.
Would you forward that revised version as soon as you get it done?
Sure.
Do we have any additional inspection requirements in terms of our building inspector? You see any impact on the record keeping or documentation of the inspection or any
Inspections,
Yes.
there is going to be.
That's a great question, and yes, so if it's 18 inches above base flood elevation, for example, then we need to identify that. Now, the company would ask the contractor to indicate where BFE is and where the 18 inches above base flood elevation would be. And so our inspector would do a spot check. You all have indicated this is base flood elevation and this is 18 inches above. So that's a pretty quick thing. Same thing with portals or entries going through the foundation. They're either there or they're not there. Now, if they're obstructed, or there could be some items that would cause a little bit more time, but for the most part, it's either there or not there. So that's the special inspection
It's
there.
also going to be whether they meet the, I forget what the definition is, but the collapsible entryway.
But I guess my question was, does the ordinance itself need to speak to the inspection process in some manner? Is it different enough that it needs to be addressed?
I can't envision a way that it is different enough.
That's just something else they can
Be
evaluate us on.
codified.
Or nick us on.
Well, yeah, no, I'm certainly not looking to expand it, but I'm also a little bit concerned that if we approve a permit and we've inspected, said it's in compliance, can that end our liability? Not necessarily just the pure legal liability, but the sort of the obligation to the property owner that we've certified that you've done everything you're supposed to do, or your contractor did everything they were supposed to do. This is,
And these
different
additional
work.
responsibilities are gonna fall upon who?
The building inspector as it relates to building permits. As
So they're
relates
gonna have to be re-educated as far as what's allowed, permissible.
Yes, under these codes. I would add too, I'm looking for guidance as it relates to accessory structures in the floodplain, and there are two paths you can take. They can either be prohibited or they can be allowed with a variance and restrictions.
I would prefer the variance.
So that is a decision point too. And
But that gets into the Board of Zoning Appeals then, doesn't it?
It specifies that it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If it doesn't go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, either goes to the Chief Executive Officer or to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, there are a lot of restrictions, a lot of guidance for the BZA as well.
do you have any sense how many parcels are in the county are impacted by this?
I do not in my head, but I can get that for you a day or two.
I mean, is it a substantial number?
I think we were at 1,300 or something like that. I don't
It's a mailing is.
Sounds substantial.
I mean, it's plus everybody in the
Substantial.
lake. I mean, that's.
I bet you I
Do
got
you know
about
the
800 of
postal
them.
I don't know why 1,500 to 2,000 is coming to mind.
So 10% of our parcels. We have 25,000 or 23,000 parcels.
It had to be more than that.
That,
I mean,
that's a big number.
percentage-wise. Well, you raise a good point. number of parcels versus, square acreage, it's
But
not,
our permits are by parcel.
right, that's right. That's right, so I
Our
mean,
inspections are by dwelling, or by individual structures. Well, I mean, I don't know that we've even do that, I'm just trying to scope the
Sure, we get
problem
that
a little
information.
bit.
Pretty much anywhere that there's a creek.
Yep.
There is now a flood zone.
Is this gonna add any additional cost to the permitting process?
No, not to the applicants.
Not to that.
No, I mean,
That wasn't the question. That was not the question. Is it going to raise the cost of the process?
Do you have to do more work?
yeah, I mean, they'll have to look for two things they're not looking for
Okay,
before.
but, okay, the inspector's going to have to look for more. The permit techs are going to have to enter more information, and there's going to be separate records that are going to need to be kept. So to answer your question,
Those costs will want to be passed along.
that's exactly right, and we have to make sure, because those costs have not increased over the years, as they probably should have. So they're all things to look at, but you can rest assured, anytime that we add any layer to a process, it increases the cost, whether it's to the taxpayer directly or through taxpayer services that are provided. Yes.
and I would just say that, it's the cumulative effect of every piece of new stuff. At some point, it starts to drive, cost more than you might want it to. I would note that, this is standard, expectation for building officials across the country, and I think we're a little bit later to the party, only in that our mapping hadn't been done at this level. Whereas I think everyone in Tidewater's been having to measure the base flood elevation and deal with all that in their normal building process for quite a few years. We're just a little delayed, so it's well understood by the inspection industry and taught in their code classes, and they're probably, fully aware of it, they just haven't had to really do it yet. So that's kind of where we are.
Just like anything, new federal, new state, it all flows downhill.
Well, they've handed us a situation, I mean, by the way, 0.002 is once every 500 years. They've handed us a 500-year problem.
0.02.
Mhm.
Right.
Did they put the percent sign when they shouldn't have?
Well, I don't know, but it says 0.2%, which is 0.002, so that's 500 years.
And that affects the rates, hopefully for folks in those zones, the rates are low or lower or affordable, but that's kind of where we are. Our only option is to not do it, not be in the program. There are a few places like that, and the challenge there is that folks can't get bank financing, so it's not.
We don't want to adversely affect.
That's right.
All right, so if you'll take care of those, and we'll review and see if there's anything else.
Absolutely, very well. Mr. Chair, if I may add, so this does call for 2 hearings in the March, April time period. And one would be before the planning commission, change to the zoning code, has to go through the planning commission and then in front of you all. So just keep in mind, we start to get tight on our timeframes as we're in March. That's all.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Allison, we have a Watch for Children sign request from Fraser.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We did receive from the Property Owners Association for Fraser's Landing subdivision a request for Watch for Children sign. There's a little bit of background information in the memo, but basically, VDOT regulations were changed by the General Assembly, where these sign requests can no longer be made by the locality via resolution to VDOT for them to study the area, make a determination, and install the sign. Instead, now the signs still have to go through the local governing body But by agreement, with VDOT, the, local governing body would be allowed to install the sign, at the cost of the locality. The cost to purchase, install, maintain, and repair the sign, for the life of the sign. So, that background information is there, but, I'm putting the request in front of you this evening, to get your opinion on how we proceed. My suggestion would be if the board were to move forward with this, and what I've talked to the Property Owners Association about is making this a zero cost initiative for the county. We've received, since VDOT regulations changed, I believe in 2014 or 2015, we've received one or two other requests like this, and the approach has been for it to be a zero cost initiative for the county. And those organizations chose not to move forward. This Property Owners Association is agreeable with moving forward at zero cost to the county, other than staff time to apply for the permit, and for the county attorney's assistance in developing the agreement. So I did outline 3 items there under recommended action for the board's consideration, and that's the guidance that we're looking for this evening.
The draft agreement that was here, is that a VDOT document that they included, and have you had a chance to take a look at it?
Okay, yeah.
Because I think that's one of the key things that if, that it's pretty clear what our involvement is and is not, both financially and otherwise. And this is a community down near Lake Anna, actually part of the property front on Lake Anna. And I know they're concerned because there's some permanent residents have moved in, and all of a sudden there are a lot of FedEx and UPS trucks and other kind of activities coming through there, and they want to just sort of crank it down a little bit. That's what they're after. They seem to be willing to bear all the costs of doing this, but I think the one thing we need to make sure of is that the county attorney's had a chance to review whatever final agreement clearly assigns the responsibilities to the HOA in this case.
Right, so the agreement that's contained in your agenda packet is the agreement with VDOT. So that is a form agreement that VDOT provides for the locality to enter. And their agreement does make it clear that it's between the local governing body, because that is the only body that's allowed to make the request, and VDOT. But VDOT staff has indicated that outside of the agreement between the county and VDOT, the county is permitted to have separate agreements with the requester to be responsible for anything else related to the
And it's
sign.
that agreement that I think we
Yes, and until I brought it to the board, Tom has not expended any energy on it because we wanted to get kind of the consensus from the board before we move forward with that agreement.
So I think it's a reasonable request. I would move forward.
All right, so do we have a consensus? All in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Town should expend some energy.
Spend some energy.
So we will bring it back so the board can look at that final agreement before we proceed. Thank you.
All right, going to make one slight change as far as the order of our agenda. We're going to go ahead and skip down to item 14, public hearing, SUP 21-03. Should be fairly short, should accommodate the county attorney. So,
There's not much left.
right, well, there may be, there may not be, so we're going to go ahead and do
You haven't
this.
heard board comment
Right,
yet.
so, okay,
Mr. Chairman, Josh is here for the staff report for that item, and I'd like to note that Massey Saunders and Jay Palmer are joining on Zoom.
okay, well, very good. This is SUP 21-03. We're considering a special use permit application from Central Virginia Electric Co-op for the installation of a fiber facility on Litchfield Drive. Mr. Gillespie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to abbreviate comments a little bit, or?
No.
Okay, we're fine. Okay. So this
Maybe I
is.
should have said yes, but.
Well, I'll be brief and succinct anyway. So this is property on Litchfield Drive in the Thomas Lee Industrial Park. Property in question, the subject parcel, was recently divided and purchased from the Economic Development Authority. And for the purpose of accommodating this planned utility use, which is a fiber hut, telecommunications with rapid and electric co-op. So you can see that in some particular co-op. So in this installation, they're going to have an above ground structure, which is known as the fiber hut. It's larger than a cabinet, which is where some of these fiber facilities go through. And it is essentially a public utility that needs to be considered for two determinations. The first is whether it's in substantial accordance with the comprehensive plan of Orange County. The Planning Commission is the final determinant on that. Under state code, it's chapter 2232. So in your packet, I'll just note that there's a resolution from the Planning Commission recognizing that they determined that this project as proposed is in accordance, substantial accordance with the comprehensive plan. There's some details that go into that consideration that met. The second is that there is an application for a special use permit that would allow this use on the parcel with an attached concept plan, which would regulate the controlling document for the plan of development. These properties, both the subject property and all its surrounding adjoiners, are zoned general industrial I2 in the industrial park. The industrial park, as you know, is a mixture of sort of open areas and somewhat of a bowl, rolling hills. This particular parcel is sort of a wooded thicket, and so it's up a hill a little bit. There will be some bank cutting, so some grading and some sort of change of grade. So there's some potential visual impact that needed to be evaluated. The traffic impact is almost none after construction. There's a minimal amount of service and maintenance that occurs. There are some conditions that are attached to this in addition to the other controlling document, which is the site plan and concept plan. That mostly relates to the perimeter fencing, and then secondarily that lighting be consistent with our dark skies regulations, specifically that security lighting be on a motion sensor, not be turned on in evening hours, or turned off in the morning. So because it's an unmanned facility, it would be okay to keep the lights off most of the time, except when needed for being able to navigate around the building. So the Planning Commission, in a unanimous vote, recommends to you that the SUP 2103 be approved as presented with the conditions that were included in the report.
Okay, thank you. Did the applicants have anything that they wanted to add to this?
Mr. Saunders or Mr. Palmer, would you all like to make any comments?
This is Jay Palmer from Central Virginia Electric Cooperative. I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to review this tonight. We are looking forward to, I will say we're looking forward to, moving ahead with this project. I think that the residents of Orange County, not just directly around the fiber hut, but all of the members that serves with electricity and beyond into some of the other areas of Orange County and parts of Louisa, will certainly benefit from this facility, and we look forward to getting this project moving ahead. And I just thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. All right, I will open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up or any comments submitted?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We did not receive any written comments ahead of time, but Denise Hansen is here to speak this evening, and her address is 26483 Penfield Drive.
Welcome, and if you would state for the record your name and your address.
Yes, my name is Denise Hansen. I live at 26483 Penfield Drive, Fraser's Landing. We would love to have those signs. And I'm here in reference to talk about the letter that I sent to you yesterday to this board, and short-term rentals and tax.
Hold on just a second. This is for a public hearing. For this one case.
Right, for this specific case.
What case?
This Central Virginia Electric Cooperative.
Okay, that's not, I didn't hear that, that's what you're calling me for.
We did not have public comment on the calendar for tonight.
Okay,
However, since you did make the trip here, when we finish this public hearing, I will entertain your public comment.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed, ma'am.
We have no other speakers signed up.
Okay. Close public hearing. Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Approve.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
and Mr. Frame.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Very good. Then real quick, we'll move on to the county attorney's report.
Quick report, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to lodge a complaint. This is our last meeting in this room for 9 years. Every time we've had a presentation, I've had to drop my seat and go outside. And our last presentation, you went around the other way and took that final joy away from me.
Well, tell you what, would you like me to come in and welcome our speaker? All right, very good. All right, and since we do have someone that did go to the trouble to come for public comment and sit for our meeting, if you'd like to come on up and address us.
Hello again, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Denise Hampton. I live at 26483 Pennsfield Drive, Fraser Landing, Orange, Virginia. And again, we love to have those signs. I'm here in reference to short-term rentals, zoning policy, and tax collections. I want to give you a quick, short story. We purchased our property in Fraser's Landing 18 years ago. We built a home, and within a year, we loved it here so much, we moved here full-time because only a part-time resident at that time. We built a home. It was supposed to be our forever home. But you know the commercial, changing plans, life changes. We took in our mother-in-law, that was okay, but then I had to take my parents. So we ended up building a cottage, and they stayed with us for several years. When they passed, I'm left with a building, and I started Airbnb. Never thought in the world that I would ever get involved in this business, but I will tell you, I have loved it. It has been great meeting people, sharing the love that I have for this community, and telling them, you know, the adventures. But life changes, plans change. I had a serious health issue. My husband and I had to look at each other and say, this is not our forever home. We can't stay here. We sat down, we've mapped it out. Instead of cutting the grass, we want to put our toes in the sand and relax and not have yard work. We're certainly going to miss it here. But we have to make a choice. We researched, we planned to move to the beach. We spent the last year downsizing. You can imagine, you all know when you are together for a lot of years, how much stuff you collect. I had yard sales. I have sold 80% of my belongings. Because when you go to the beach, houses are already furnished. I know I can't take anything with me. Got done that, put the house up for sale, sold. Then we were informed last week that the lender who is going to loan the money denied for one reason. Orange County evidently has a zoning ordinance that you are not allowed to have a rental unless it's owner occupied. I was in this room in 2018 when we talked about the registrations. I was all for registrations. I was all for paying the tax. I pay my tax. Never did it ever come up that you had to be owner occupied. Let me tell you, there are several hundred units operating in Orange County that are not owner occupied. Mr. White, We got a couple. Mr. Frame, you got a lot. But I checked every one of your districts, so this affects everybody. It not only affects that, when you have an Airbnb, people come in, they spend money. You guys get the tax revenue. I've had an Airbnb guest who stayed with me for 2 years, off and on. They have now bought a piece of property in Orange. They're planning on doing 50% them and 50% Airbnb. That's not allowed. According to your ordinance, it's not allowed. The damage that this has done to me and my husband financially, and the emotional stress that this is causing is incredible. Nowhere, look at your Airbnb, your rental, nowhere does it say it has to be owner occupied. Shut it down. Get your zoning people to shut everybody down. Get your commission of revenue to get their books straight, because that's a whole other issue you guys should know about. Not for today. This is delaying my husband retiring. Now we don't have the funds to go buy a house, okay? Because I've got this mortgage. Now he's delayed retiring. So needless to say, that really has impacted us. But this county cannot collect rent or taxes on illegal rentals, what they consider illegal rentals. It's not right. You have prevented me from selling my property. You have devaluated my property as well as a lot of other properties. You want tourism? You're gonna cut it. I mean, you wanna bring people to the area? We don't have the hotels. People wanna come here. That's what we're doing to accommodate them. So, I mean, I sent you the letter. I didn't expect a response, but I came here to face to tell you this is a very serious situation for me and my husband. It is going to be a very serious situation for the hundreds of homeowners who do this. They're gonna have hardship, financial hardship. So I'm asking you guys to do something. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
It's on the floor.
All right, at this time, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Oh,
There it is.
we're going to go ahead and adjourn or recess. excuse
Recess.
me, Recess. And we will be back in a little while. Tom left. Do we need to do anything for the recess?
You're just recessing.
Right.
Okay, so we're recessing for dinner and we will be back.
Cole, thank you.
Wow.
Walker, can you turn the live stream back on, please? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we are ready.
Very good. I reconvene the Board of Supervisors meeting, and we will continue at this point with old business. See none. Do you have anything, Mr. Voorhees, on that?
Nothing really other than to note that this is the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor Day. So I recognize that.
That is
By all
old business.
Americans to take note.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, are you going to say it? Or I want to thank the building for its service. This is our last official meeting in this building.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes. Yes, and it's been a good building for us. Looking forward to moving on. And we will get wherever Mrs. Williams, we will get another better photograph instead of me looking for gnats in the air. I see no department directors or constitutional officers here, so I presume we have no reports from them. And we did the county administrator or county attorneys, and you had nothing else, Mr. Voorhees?
Yes, sir.
Board comment. Let's start with Mr. Frame.
Good.
Well, I have a plethora of board comments.
Would you like to be held to last?
After we leave that last.
First of all, as Mr. Voorhees mentioned, this is the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and so I want to take note of that. That was one of the major events in our country's history, and so we've reached a fairly significant milestone of 80 years. I also want to mention that on Sunday, we lost Bob Dole. And Bob was elderly. He was 98 years old. And he was actually born during the Warren G. Harding administration. But I wanted to read just a little bit from his Wikipedia page because this kind of ties back to Pearl Harbor. He joined the Army's Enlisted Reserve Corps in 1942 to fight in World War II. Became a second lieutenant in the Army's 10th Mountain Division. In April 1945, while engaged in combat in Italy, he was seriously wounded by a German shell that struck his upper back and right arm, shattering his collarbone and part of his spine. I lay face down in the dirt, Dole said. I could not see or move my arms. I thought they were missing. As Lee Sandlin describes, when fellow soldiers saw the extent of his injuries, they believed all they could do was give him the largest dose of morphine they dared and write an M for morphine on his forehead in his own blood so that nobody else who found him would give him a second fatal dose. He was paralyzed from the neck down and transported to a military hospital near Kansas. He suffered from blood clots, a life-threatening infection, and a fever of almost 109 degrees. I didn't know human beings could even withstand that. He recovered and, of course, went on to a distinguished career. And then finally, yes, this is the last meeting, regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors in this building. And I was just thinking as you all were commenting that I think 1992 was when the board started meeting in this room. Prior to that, the board met in the district courtroom, which no longer exists. Prior to that, they met in the circuit courtroom, which does still exist. And as far as I know, in terms of the Board of Supervisors as now constituted, Those are the only three places that the board has ever met on a regular basis: circuit court, district court, and in this room. When they initially met here, and for about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years afterwards, there was just a long table. I think it may be the one that's upstairs in the admin conference room, I'm not sure, but there was just a table here. And they would bring in portable tables to sit at the end for the county administrator and the Janice Crockett with her huge notebooks of bills. Because every meeting the board would go through and say, this $42 here to Byron Sunoco, what's that about? And she would go digging through and come up with it. Anyway, but it was in the late 90s that Tom Shalusta, the county attorney, took this beautiful desk right here that was actually had belonged to the school board, and he did the woodwork around the front and made it a little snazzier, and we've been meeting here ever since. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be meeting in the new public safety building, and it's got all kinds of fancy stuff, but a lot of, I think, good things have happened in this room, so hopefully we can do some more good things when we get to the new building. And I'm now done, Mr. Chair.
And most importantly, we will have new chairs. Mr. White?
I look forward to it. Just one addition to the comments about today being the 80th year beyond the attack at Pearl Harbor. I made the comment earlier to some of you. I read something, I guess it was yesterday, that was essentially a series of clippings from local newspapers across the country announcing over the past few years the death of the last local survivor of Pearl Harbor. And it was quite impactful to see that rolling through, that made me realize that one of the things that comes with 80 years hence is that you lose the people involved very quickly. And the day is not far where the last one will be lost. And we need to learn from those. Some of them are still telling stories, war stories and the like. And I hate to see all that history be lost. I hope a lot of it has been recorded in some fashion such that we can be preserved.
Library of Congress has had a program built.
Right, and there's been a real effort recently, and but time is running out now. So, but let's make sure it continues. 80 years is a long time.
Mr. Marshall?
Just want to say I enjoy listening to y'all's comment. I don't have it.
Very good. And I have nothing. As people tell me on a regular basis. And with that being said, next would be informational items. After that, appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. I believe we may have some that we need to consider here.
Yes. We received the application for Tom Pratt. I'd like to nominate him to the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Service Board. And you got the application from Mr. Logan.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to nominate him to the Thomas Jefferson Area Community Criminal Justice Board.
His last name again was
Logan.
Logan,
Yes.
right?
Then the other, we don't need to take action tonight, but may as well get it out of the way. I would like to nominate to reappoint the members of the Broadband Authority under their respective districts. Anything else that anyone has? If not, I will look for a second on those motions.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All of those passed unanimously. You have those, Mrs. Simpson?
Yes, sir.
Calendar. Seems to have a lot of things on it and a few things scratched out. I don't believe we have anything that we need to add to that at the current time, is that correct?
That is correct. We don't have any items to schedule.
With that being said, we've had our public hearing, there was no closed meeting. I would entertain one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And at this point, we are adjourned. And at this point.
Walter, we're ready to adjourn, please.